Hello there and welcome to the introduction of my iconic fabrics. We are going to do a bit of fabric anatomy and I'm going to take you piece by piece on my latest collection for Anna Maria Textiles so that you can hear about my inspirations, learn about the artwork behind the collection, and I'm also going to lay it out into a few different groupings so you can see some inspiring ways to use these in terms of color and structure, which I think is really what this collection brings to the table. So first off, let's start with the prints themselves. This is the first time I have ever done a daffodil print, and I was so excited to do it. There's such a beautifully structured little flower. This is the Lush colorway in that bright yellow against a forest green. I also have this gorgeous bubblegum pink with a pale pink and white daffodil, and then I have another pale pink and white daffodil, but this time it's sitting on this pretty almost pinky terracotta background for a little bit more earthiness in the collection. I also did pansies for the first time. I have never done pansies before. I was really enamored by some that I bought last year that had this nice dark edging on the petals. I was so inspired by that. So there's 3 different colorways of those pansies. And these are pretty true to life in terms of like the actual variety that these flowers are available at the nursery, which is fun. Sometimes I keep things pretty realistic in terms of floral color. I think for the most part, this collection does try to be honest about the shape, size, and details of the flower. Now this one is a little graphic and overblown. This is straw flower. Straw flowers normally are a lot smaller than this, but I loved the detail of their petals on the inside so much. There are so many tiny, tiny little parts to that center that I just really got kind of lost in drawing that geometry. It's a nice deep purple one. And I love this kind of aqua and gold vintage style, which sits in my vintage palette. I'm gonna show you all the palettes here in just a minute. So those, as you can see, they're all kind of structured the same. They're all stacked on top of each other in a way that makes them really easy to cut. I also decided, though, to give you a little bit of difference, I created a stripe out of the forget-me-not flower. Forget-me-nots are so tiny, but when you get close to them, the detail is absolutely beautiful. I thought I would really play with them in a much more structured form instead of their teeny tiny form, so they have a bit more presence this way. And I love this one. This one is just so kind of not me. It's so romantic and soft, but it still has a nice, very optimistic, springy color tone to it. So we have 3 florals, the daffodil, pansy, and straw flower. They're all kind of alternately stacked on each other. We have this stripe, and then to set everything off and give a point of difference, we have a print that I have been thinking about in my head for years. If you're familiar with my echinacea fabric, it's been a very popular fabric for me over the years. We've done so many colors, and the more I get into my gardening and my quilting at the same time, the more I realize there's a lot of life in echinacea that we can share that would be really beautiful for quilt making and really beautiful for just a fabric design. And so I decided to create a print that sort of combines the entire lifespan of a flower from its very beginnings to its full open bloom onto one plant. Because very often, if you have ever grown echinacea, you know that that cluster of flowers that's being grown, they're all at different stages at the same time. So instead of just showing the echinacea in its one bloom stage, I created this print called Lifespan that shows it in its very earliest form and then starting to open up and then really starting to have the bloom until it's finally in full bloom from the top. As you know, my echinacea print always was a silhouette from the side of the flower. So I'm very excited about this print. In fact, you can see that silhouette of the echinacea kind of in this dark shadowy spot right here that is just like the shape of the traditional echinacea print. Here's another color, which this is probably my favorite one. This is a much more muted aquas and a little tiny bit of pink on the edge of those flowers. And then this is a really deep, rich green with the bright, bright pink. So you can see that bouquet design is just really like, you can see how many bouquets you have across a width here. You have about 4.5 bouquets across a width. And so they really stack into each other well too. So I want to talk a little bit more about structure. I try to learn from my fabrics in terms of like, why are things popular? I've always asked myself, why is echinacea so popular? And I think the answer that I've come up with is, of course, it's a pretty flower in print, but I think it's so easy to use. It's so reliable in terms of how many flowers you can get across the width of a fabric. And so with all of these first 3 prints that I showed you, I was really doing that same thing. I've stacked them into each other, staggered on the width as well as the length. So they're very easy to fussy cut. They're also really pretty and interesting just to use because of that stagger setting as a whole piece. But they are incredible for specifically cutting. There are so many flowers, like 1 yard of fabric is going to yield dozens and dozens of blooms, right? It's like a high yield on your planting your seeds. And it's part of what I was inspired by when I was designing the quilt pattern, which you'll see behind me. So this is the iconic quilt pattern that's available in shops. And if you buy the booklet from your store, it's also going to include 2 templates. It's going to include the corner triangles here, which every time I always cut those out of the forget-me-not stripe, so that creates a nice little repeat around the quilt. Then you're going to have the main triangle, which is here, which the great thing again about these prints is that it's so easy to set your templates onto the repeat, because you basically, that stem behind all the flowers, that's basically your center line for all these pieces. So it's a lot of fussy cutting. I think it's well worth it. That's one of the reasons I think that these fabrics, you know, that are set in this style have been so popular, because they're so easy to use. Now, beyond creating this pattern, which I think is really beautiful, I pulled even the templates from the piecework quilt that are the diamond and the hexagon, just to kind of show you how beautifully, for instance, this can sit. This hexagon can be on the pansy. Look how pretty the hexagon template will sit right over that daffodil. Like, it just works really, really well. And I've already lost it. Here I go, losing things. Okay, and then also I wanted to show you even the diamond. If you wanted to do some diamond DPP or some stars, they're so pretty. Again, you have that center line as the stem. They're so pretty on top of this little bouquet of forget-me-nots. I think they would actually really work well in the pansies too. All right, so, oh, it's perfect. Look at that, it fits right in there. I'm dead. Okay, that's exciting. I'm gonna go EPP now. I'll see you guys later. All right, but before I do that, I'm going to quickly put these together in their colorways so we can have a look at what's happening there. Okay, welcome to Colorway Land. Again, I've created this collection in 3 different colorways. We have vintage, cherry, and lush, which you can see all the collections on the wall behind me are in that same organization. With the vintage colorway in the collection, this one has some of those trademark vintage kind of golden and pinky hues, but it has a really nice punctuation of that deep green and some army green. And I just pulled a piece of fabric from the Piecework collection, which was my last collection in the sequence of fabric releases, in a vintage colorway, and I just wanted to show you how beautiful that looked together. So it's a nice little blender, even though it's got a zillion colors in it. It's a gorgeous blender for that colorway. And then this is the cherry colorway. A lot of the cherry colorways in the AMT collections have a lot of orange. This one is really focused on the pink and the green and the purple. I love that. It's very garden-y. I also pulled this Piecework piece, redundant, this Piecework print and Oh My Stars print from the Piecework collection in the cherry colorway, just because I think it pulled all that pink and green and blue together really beautiful, and it adds some tiny little touches of gold, which you actually see in some of the fabrics here too. Okay, and finally, here's the Lush colorway, which usually doesn't have a lot of yellow, but I thought that was such a perfect accent for this group. And I thought I would pull one more Piecework print, the Flying Geese in the Lush colorway, and show you just how stunning that is together. It really pulls together basically almost all the exact colors, but in a completely different way, in a smaller, graphic, kind of a fussier way. So that's just it's a fun thing for me to look at, and it gets me so excited about all the possibilities between the collections from one to the next that I think it's worth sharing, and it makes me want to quit my job and just sew, which is ironic because that's sort of what I do for a living. The Iconic collection is in stores now. We have the pattern out as well. I did bring in this darling little dress. Again, like I do with almost every collection, I made Shake It Shift, which is one of my simple start patterns, which you can get in shops as well as my website at annamariaperry.com. And I think it looks really, really pretty in the lifespan print. I cannot wait to see what you do with these iconic florals, and I hope you love it and enjoy your time sewing with them. Thank you for joining me today.